Hello and welcome to a very special video. As you can see, I'm surrounded by some retro bikes, the likes of which I've not seen before, and they all belong to this man here, Rich. Rich, thanks for joining us today and sharing your amazing bikes with us.
Oh, my pleasure. And I say it's a little snippet here, but certainly what is an addictive collection of some memory lane memorabilia.
It certainly is. I've never seen a collection like it before, and I'm very jealous. So before we get into the why you're collecting bikes, let's first explain where we are, I guess.
Yeah, we're sat currently in the back end of the warehouse in the lockdown bar at Saddleback HQ, and I say we've kind of got these little breakout zones, I suppose we call them, more for just a bit of mental clarity, hangout space, a bit of a chill zone, but also probably an excuse to put all this lovely old junk.
Very fortunate. I'm sure these bikes wouldn't fit in your garage or shed at home, would they? So having space to keep them all.
I have to own up then at that same time. Yeah.
So before we get into why you're collecting bikes, let's explain to the viewer your background in cycling. You work in the bike trade. Some might say it's a dream job. You combine your hobby with work. But where does cycling begin for you? What's your earliest memory of riding bikes and the first bike you rode?
So I mean, I've been to Saddleback now for coming up 12 years soon, and that's my only job in the bike trade. Started off doing PR and then moved into brand management, and then before that look after all the purchasing side of things here. And it's a great place to work. I think that's probably partly down to the family environment, the cool brands that we've nurtured into the portfolio, and just having the beating heart for pretty much everything we do. So it's quite nice, that part. Does it give me an excuse to ride my bike and do all the things I love and around people that are similar way of mind? Yeah, it's awesome. So that's quite nice. But I suppose cycling for me, I raced bikes from 16 to currently. Can't lose that habit. But before that, I suppose it's kind of picking up my bike, and the first time was just the freedom two wheels brought you, really, as a kid, escaping the village, exploring and seeing the world, very reality not far from my village, but at the same time it felt like a million miles as the world kind of got a little bit bigger as you kind of like grew with age, and that kind of stems. I can't remember what my first bike is.
Really? I don't remember the first bike, couldn't they? Rally Grifter for me, so...
Yeah, I'd love to say a Grifter. I'd loved it to be cool. I think I had a BMX as my first, and I certainly remember a lot of hand-me-downs. Yep. But one thing that does stand out, and I can't remember if it's my first for sure, but I had a magged wheeled BMX with a noise box on top that used to do laser noises and police sirens and stuff like that. And if I could, I'd probably get that laser box back now, put it on any bike I own. But yeah, it was pretty cool. I'm sure there's a photo somewhere of me dressed up as a sheriff trying to pull other kids over.
Was there cycling in the family? I mean, do your parents ride bikes?
Not at all. Okay. No, it's pretty unique. I think a little group of guys. Friends that kind of explored a little bit and just went out and rode, and that was the freedom bit. That was the boys just creating the little brotherhood. And there was a chap that came over from the US that I remember quite well. I must have been, I'm going to say, like 12, 13 years old, and mountain biking was already on the radar, the magazines, the kind of the buzz. It was the only thing before cars came along. And a chap from the US was staying in the village with some friends of ours, and he raced bikes, and he had the XTR, he had the RockShox, he had all the cool stuff that we just like, wow, we're in awe. So we showed him our trails, gave him a little bit of a map out to where to ride, and he kind of got us hooked a little bit into what the world of racing brought. So that's kind of where that kind of, I suppose, the focus on kind of competing really kind of stems from.
So that chance encounter really hooked you into the world of cycling, and more to the point, mountain biking?
Oh, completely. Road was never on the radar. It was mountain biking was kind of like focused in all that existed. Yeah.
And just to put a time, we're talking about the early 90s, I guess, here, aren't we?
Early 90s, yeah.
For me, mountain biking was like early to mid 90s.
Yeah.
And magazines like MBK, And then I went to a Grundig in Plymouth.
Yep.
And that was my first, wow, this sport's amazing. And it really captured my imagination. And I guess it's a similar story to you as well.
We raced in, I raced the Nationals actually at Grundig. That's what we've been calling it. Down in Plymouth, at Newham Park.
Yeah.
And that got nicknamed the Grundig. We're going back for the Grundig.
Yeah.
It's been so long since I raced there.
Infamous pipeline.
Amazing. None of that existed anymore. But also at the same time, you probably look at it now and think, what was I so feared about the pipeline? But when you're racing skinny tired, less travel, no brakes, angles are all out. It didn't necessarily encourage you to go too quickly. But yeah, I'm an 80s baby, so the 90s, sort of, as you kind of mature into 10 plus, it was you're looking into that 91, 92, 93, 94. Like it really, the momentum in mountain biking was so big then, as it kind of really set its roots out, and that was possibly one of the coolest periods of time in mountain biking, as I see it. Certainly, and that's where a lot of this collection kind of like sits in.
Yeah, I'd echo that statement definitely. For me, it's like a really exciting time to be into a sport, like a young teenager.
Yeah.
And new bikes coming out every week, and it's a really exciting, dynamic sport and big American influence as well. And so you got into mountain biking in the 90s, and you can see that in your collection of bikes here, which are all kind of stem from that period of immense innovation during the 90s, early 90s, mid 90s. When did you start collecting bikes, and what was the kind of the motivation behind collecting bikes?
I don't want to call it a crisis, but I ended up, I'm going to say 4 years ago now, reminiscing with a friend of mine, a chap called Justin Hoy, and I think we ended up just staring at these kind of cool old bikes, something. I don't know what the kind of catalyst was, but it was certainly over a beer. That certainly helped. And it stemmed into, wow, what about this bike? And have you seen this? What we can pick up. And our focus was pretty, let's say, tight on model or brand that we resonated with as a kid. And for me, that was Marin, or Marin if you're American. And that ended up kind of like setting my tone into racing. So I really kind of focused in on the bikes that I never owned of that period that I always wanted. That kind of took over a little bit quickly. So it must have been probably about 4 years ago, I think. And in that period of time, for what feels like possibly a bit of a roller coaster, something that might have got slightly out of control with, I'll just get one and before you know it, you're on 2, 3, 4 plus whatever. And it just took hold, and then it felt like we moved up the ranks. It was like, well, actually, there's another unicorn bike, and then there's another unicorn, and before that, your collection starts to take a bit of a hold on what really shaped it, I suppose. And for me, that period of time was probably 1993. Yeah.
So the focus was trying to buy bikes you couldn't own or afford when you were young, so trying to... Pretty
much, yeah. And it's if you learn anything, I mean, racing bikes, all the stuff that I wish I'd kept, and you move it on, it's by that point, it's either massively worn out, rusted away, or you need the cash to pay for your next entry fees. And it was kind of like you're on that, the addict cycle of racing. Whereas now it's kind of, you're on another addict cycle, it feels like, where you've got this chase for stuff that's just, that leaves a little bit of a mark. And you can kid yourself to say they're all investments, but at the same time, it's like it's filling this nice, nurtured hole of what you wanted to own, or what you dreamt to own, or stuff that was just completely out of reach in that period of time.
Which was the first bike then? Which was like the unicorn bike that you had to buy that restarted your obsession with collecting?
Amusingly, I don't have it anymore. Okay. I kind of tried to clear a little bit out, even though some people might not think that's necessarily happened. Ended up being a 1995 Marin Pine Mountain. So yeah, a nice mix of White Industries, XT, some, I think I had Manitou M3s on at the time. It was, and it was in really beautiful condition, but as I kind of nurtured a bit of a collection, I realised actually what bikes were meaningful to me and which I wanted, and the route I started to go down.
And you started with one bike. How many bikes are we at now then? I mean, there's quite a few behind us, but I know there's lots more upstairs, which we'll look at in a bit.
I mean, I might be able to whisper that to you in a minute. So I don't know how many of you got in shot here, but there's a few here that aren't mine.
Okay.
And that comes down to the bug that's naturally taken a lot of, let's say, victims of staff members over this period of time, where they've bought one or two and they've had their own little journeys. So it's become a little bit more of a business thing, that we've all gone down this nerdy route into the 90s and started collecting these bikes. So that's been a fun point that's kept the business kind of engaged, and again, part of that family style that we've got here. It's just it's quite nice that we've got common interests.
Okay,
the number,
ballpark it.
Ballpark, it's
double
just
figures?
It's certainly in double figures. It's just shy of 20 at the moment.
20 bikes.
And
Wow.
there's a few in build.
Okay, that's why they're here at work and not in your shed at home.
Yeah, exactly, that's it. You're going to say that. And the other side of this, I'm like, what's the point of collecting a lot of bikes if other people can't enjoy them?
Okay.
I think if it was just me geeking out in my shed, I'd feel like, you know, you'd have to try and pull people in to welcome them, and that just feel weird to me. I don't know if I can make my shed nice enough to encourage people to come visit without them thinking, why am I sat in a shed looking at some old bikes when they've got no interest. But here, the like-minded people, the right theme, the right setting, a bit more space to enjoy them. It's the kind of like where it's really nurtured itself. There's no objective really here. We don't have a space to fill. There's no end goal, okay. Which is probably quite daunting. But no, it's kind of it's an actual point now where it's starting to feel like the collection's got enough there. I feel.
And you call it a collection. Did you have a plan, or do you have a plan now for the bikes in the collection? Like each bike has to earn its place, and is that based on just your own personal kind of view of that bike, or are you trying to kind of collect a moment in time of history of key bikes from that period?
Yeah, you always feel like maybe there's one more. I want to take my time over some of this now. It's escalated pretty quickly, and there's a need now to kind of like just go, well, actually, I wouldn't mind filling that year, or putting something into, whether it's a group set. There's a catalyst to anything. It could be that you start building a bike based on just having a set of quick release skewers in a nice colour, but now it's kind of a bit more focused on maybe a brand or something to fit in a gap somewhere. Instead of being defined by just one brand, I quite like having the mixed view of it, because for me, I flip-flop, and some days I could be very much like that Team FRS gives me a lot of joy from Marin, to then flipping down the other side that, you know, some of the Yetis and the bright colours and just the nostalgic sense of that has a little bit more of a pleasing resonance. So I like this, because it creates a little bit of a peaceful mind space, really, and I think that's probably where this collection's evolved from.
And when you look at a bike, is it the technology, the rider on the bike perhaps, or the race team, or is it something else that kind of draws you to a certain bike?
Everything starts from something, yeah, for sure. And I just, it's once you start into a route of a brand, I'm not building an arc here. It's not a 2x2 thing. It's kind of like it's got slightly out of control there. But I do like, if it's a brand, to have a pair of bikes. And there'll always be the unicorn ones to go for, the ones that maybe left a mark, whether that was iconic at that period, and or there's a high stay, a full suspension bike that was in modern standards shocking, but in that period it was revolutionary, and it's just there's those things that take note. Racing certainly idolises some of the models or brands or the colours, for sure. So that tends to stem a lot of the thinking really around what I'm buying. But I'd love to walk, anyone, if you think about everything that's been searched for or looked for or referred or sent your way, this is always quite nice now. Is there it's quite nice saying no to some stuff, certainly, because I think you kind of like, at that point there, you've created this perfect either brand collection or full collection. It's like, it's what's next.
Okay.
I don't know.
And do you see the collection staying at about 20 bikes? Do you see it expanding to double that, or do you think that's the right number and in trying to kind of manage the bikes in that collection?
Yeah,
no limit to how many bikes?
Management started to get to that point, isn't it? I created a spreadsheet the other day.
Wow.
that kind of like curated. I was encouraged to do this. Okay. So Andy, who owns Saddleback, and his wife Sarah, but Andy's love is Kleins, and he's been very tight in that collection. The seal was just broken on that Klein thing, and he's stepped over to all the other possible options, even though he thinks he's controlled. It's very much maybe 20 to 25, I would say, is the threshold. Okay. At that point there, you really got to start looking at maybe what you move out to nurture off. I've even joked a few times that, do I sell a fair chunk of them and go off and buy an old 90s drop-top convertible to cruise around the streets, and then just keep one on the back. But whilst it's here and we've got the space, it's nice for people to enjoy them. So there's no current short-term, long-term plans for any of it really. Whilst I'm enjoying it, I'll enjoy it, and like most things, when I'm not, I'll go do something else.
So you're clearly enjoying it at the moment, but is it stressful having all these bikes here and kind of worrying about them? And
I've not named them all, so I'm not that. I like to think I am attached, but I'm not attached to a lot of this stuff. Okay. I like the way it makes me feel when I look at it, and I hope others get that same enjoyment from it. Part of the fun is curating it, the time it takes, whether it's repair, refurb, the right parts to build it. That part is a weird safe zone of kind of like curating this beautiful storyboard to build this bike, and then assembling it. That's always fun. At that point there, you kind of roll it aside and it starts to become this thing that just sits into the family, as it were, and you kind of like, do you focus on it as much anymore? So it's kind of a journey with these ones and twos that go through there. They've all got a little story, whether that's been the engagement of how I acquired the bike, how I built it, the process to refurb it. That's all little story points that have really kind of made up, I suppose, the connection to it. But that's kind of where it ends, really. I don't know if that's a sad thing or not, but it's an enjoyment I get from looking at them. It's quite nice. I would love to just get everyone on a bike here and we just go for a ride on them, like for them to be used. And the bikes, at the end of the day, that's what they're there for. They're not artwork.
I think we see a lot of collections, not just in the bike world, car world, that are hidden away from view, just that one person can enjoy that collection. But you sound like you're not too precious about the bikes, you're happy for other people to enjoy them. And I mean, are these all working bikes? Can you ride them? Do you ride them? Or are they sort of museum pieces?
Apart from the flat tyres nowadays, they're all working bikes.
Okay, have you ridden them all? Once you've built them up, do you ride it?
Certainly skidded them around the warehouse.
Okay.
And we've done, as a business, a few retro rides and taken them out on the lanes.
I can imagine some of these bikes are fairly pricey, or priceless perhaps.
Yeah.
Does that weigh in your mind when you're riding these bikes and seeing how people ride them? Or do you not worry about it too much?
It doesn't, as I know that I can probably find a part or a replacement. You know, the worry on some of them is, certainly on the alloy ones, is that they have a high reputation of cracking. So maybe you go a little bit easier on some of those, but
don't send it.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Just lay it down nicely. Don't do it too high, and that plays a little bit, I suppose. And then some of them, paintwork, could that get damaged and things like that? One or two chips isn't the end of the world, but certainly I think you're only going to really hold on to it with precious hands and bubble wrap the life out of it if it's got a value that you're looking to hold on to and move on at some point. I think if you're just there to enjoy it and nurture it and look at it and the fun is kind of been had and can be had by all, then at that point there, it's not necessarily about the end value. Yeah, there's certainly some value in that product of putting it together, but it's not. I'm not too precious, really.
So you don't see it as an investment, then? Like you not retire off this collection.
No,
sell it all. And
no. I could tease myself, and or justify it to the wife or the family. It's an investment, but I don't. It's not. It really is it.
I know some of these bikes can be worth quite a bit of money, aren't they?
Yeah, completely. Will I ever see the money back that's been put into them? No, probably not. I mean, the sad thing is to probably ever do that, you've got to break them down and sell them off as parts, and that seems sacrilege a lot of the time after where we've got them to. So you've got to find someone with like-minded care and attention that might just want to put them out somewhere or donate them to a museum if we had one in the UK. They're quite common in the States, aren't they? Mountain bike museums or bike museums. Netherlands as well, we've got a few. I'm starting to plan a holiday trip here.
Does sound like it, yeah. Do some research on other museums.
Exactly. Find them out.
I know from personal experience, as some of the viewers know, trying to rebuild retro mountain bikes, it's not easy, and sourcing parts, especially during the pandemic, being very challenging. But you don't seem to have any issues getting a hold of old bikes and old parts, so what's your secret way to get these bikes from?
The shop, the search for the Holy Grail. I don't, let's say, internal secrets.
Okay.
No, not at all. There's a bit everywhere, really. There's forums and sites, and that's why it's the nerdy side of it is pretty intense. You've got to know what you're looking for, and it doesn't necessarily come down from understanding what is a new old stock product, is the common phrase everyone likes, but new old stock just means that something that's possibly never been used, it's come out of a box and it's mint condition. You pay a premium for those. But you don't need new old stock. A lot of it you can revive, you can refurb. Some of the stuff's quite good. If you know the right places, the right people, you can get a lot of it put back to how it was originally, or almost, let's say, 90%. And by the time you build a bike, so one part looks a little bit, let's say, rusty and crusty, but by the time you put it on a bicycle, actually the overall package is probably quite clean. So that's one common mistake, I think, people looking for the perfect part, whereas sometimes the perfect part is not needed. But yeah, forums and eBay's a bit of an easy one to use. You pay a premium for. And then once people realise you're collecting, there's referrals. It's quite amazing. You've got eyes and ears everywhere scouting out for these parts, so which is always quite handy and distracting at the same time. Have
you dared put a price on your entire collection in your spreadsheet? Have you worked out?
I haven't done that yet. No. I don't know if I want to, actually. One, I'm hiding it from myself, and two, it's kind of probably a little bit shocking, or that worry will start to kick in. That kind of becomes this point of whoa, okay, lock them up, get insurance. But thankfully, security's fairly tight here.
Can you insure a collection of bikes like this?
I think you can insure anything, can't you? Yeah, it's I'm sure there'll be someone out there looking to take my cash to guarantee their safety. But how does that ever return the bikes to you? That's the thing. It's
irreplaceable, aren't they?
Yeah, irreplaceable, and it's you'd have to go pretty hard. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, there's got to be. There still is a lot of bikes out there that are unknown. I've got friends in bike shops that send me pictures of stuff that's been serviced, that a customer who's had something from new has just brought it back to the bike shop for a chain, a cassette, some new cables and tyres, and you're like, that bike's from '91. It's how are they still riding it? So there's still some gems out there that are kind of yet to see the light of day, or necessarily find their way to retail in the normal path. So barn finds, as they call it. Keep your eyes peeled.
So you touched on it earlier, sort of the plan for this. You don't really have a plan, but it sounds like you're talking about museums and kind of public viewings. Do you have a long-term plan to make these available for the public to view here or at a facility or museum? Here
would be, we've spoken about it. So the first event that we're going to do this year, which is kind of a bit of a nice one for us, we haven't done events for now, what is almost 20 months plus, or I could say 24 months over, for all that's gone on. So our first public outing do we want to take all the products that we sell now? A lot of them have got supply issues, the supply chain is slightly broken. Or could we go to an event and share with the public just a snapshot of what we do here, which is all bike related. We're geeks, we love it. This is Saddleback, but we're going to show it in the presence of old bikes. So our first public display of this, or part of the collection, because we're space restricted, will be Melbourne Classics.
Okay.
So we're going to go up there and have the Saddleback, the retro breakout, and just bring hopefully a little bit of enjoyment to not just the product, but a bit of storyboarding and our brands that do have a connection to the historic of old, really, as well, which is quite nice. So we'll try and break that out in step by step. So hopefully an interactive experience. So
Melbourne Classic, end of the month, I think. I'll put a link down below so you can check it out.
Beautiful. The end of the month, bank holiday weekend in August. So yeah.
Well, it's very generous of you to take your bikes along for a public viewing.
That's it, casually into a field. If you break it down, I think we're gonna sex it up slightly. It'll be quite an experience. So,
in collecting the bikes that you have and riding the bikes that you actually have done, what have you learned from your bikes? I mean, you've clearly got the memories from when you were a teenager, seeing your bikes in magazines, and now you own them. Does the reality match up to the memory, or is there a gap between the two?
I think we're all nostalgic at some point in our lives, and I think like some of these bikes, they were unobtainium completely. They didn't exist in my world, and I saw them in a picture, or that was it. It just never had that first-hand connection. Some of them I saw, and over the period of time I have seen in back rooms of places, but actually it's they do make the heart beat a little bit, I think, and the journey in sort of finding them and putting them together feels like I've done some good in some way, and that's quite nice as well, versus these things just ending up in scrap or damaged or never seen again. It's like someone's got to hold on to some of these things, and I know that there's a fair amount of collectors out there for whether it be a certain brand or a range completely. So people are holding on to them, and that's that point in history. It's like that needs to be held in a little bubble somehow, just hopefully for people to understand and enjoy it in this in some light, like I do and others.
Yeah. And if you could keep one bike from this collection, one bike, could you put one bike forward as the one you keep?
That's a really tough question. Like, I've asked myself that, and I don't, even to the point where I go, I could say that, but it's not really a real answer because it's in my head. It's like, well, I'll just take that one. That'd be fine. Actually, no, I like that one. I think the one that gives me the most pleasure to look at is probably the simplest out of the collection. It's the 1990 Yeti FRO. Okay. I think that sums up mountain biking for me. The colours, I suppose not radical in any way, but the shapes, the styling, the cleanliness of that build. In all, that is my bike to look at, I think. I feel like I've just committed there.
It's a good candidate. I think for me, it'd probably be the Super V behind us.
Yeah, 93 Super V, 1000.
Era. I mean, it's just a radical looking bike, isn't it?
It is funny, isn't it? I mean, it's all strange. This is our Southeast sales rep, George Gorey's F2000. Big fan of that bike. But that was my, not the actual one, but 95 Indian Fire Trail, my first race bike. So it's kind of like there's storyboards that kind of come from a lot of this stuff. That just, the connection runs deep.
Okay, cool. Should we go look at some bikes then?
Absolutely.
So in the next video, we'll actually go for a tour and go into detail and test Richard's memory on some of his bikes and see what the story's all about. And you can watch that, put a link down below. But thanks for sitting down and chat to us and sharing an insight into your collection. It's been a very interesting journey.
Pleasure.
And hopefully you all enjoyed it at home. And if you also collect bikes, do let us know by leaving a comment down below. Love to hear from you as always. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again very soon.